The rain pounded against the castle windows like angry fists demanding entry. Inside the grand hall, Marcus stood at attention, his royal guard uniform pressed and perfect despite the chaos erupting around him. He had served the kingdom for 12 years, ever since he was a young man of 20. Now, at 32, he knew every corner of the palace, every secret passage, and every face that belonged within these ancient stone walls. Queen Marissa swept into the hall, her emerald gown trailing behind her like a serpent. Her face was twisted with rage, a look Marcus had seen increasingly often in the 6 months since she had taken the throne. Behind her walked 3 of her personal guards, men Marcus did not recognize from his years of service. They were new additions, loyal only to Marissa, and they carried themselves with an arrogance that made his jaw tighten. "Marcus of House Thornwell," Queen Marissa announced, her voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "You are hereby stripped of your position as royal guard and banished from the palace grounds. You have until sunset to gather your belongings and leave. If you are found within the city walls after nightfall, you will be arrested for treason." The words hit Marcus like physical blows. Around him, fellow guards shifted uncomfortably, but none spoke up. They had families to protect, positions to maintain. Marcus understood, even as his world crumbled. "Your Majesty," Marcus said, keeping his voice steady, "may I know the charges against me? I have served faithfully since—" "Faithful?" Marissa laughed, the sound cold and sharp. "You were loyal to Queen Elara, not to the crown. Your constant questions about her death, your suspicious glances, your midnight wanderings through the palace, do you think I don't notice? You are a threat to the stability of this kingdom." Marcus felt his heart race. He had been careful, or so he thought. For months, he had quietly investigated the circumstances surrounding Queen Elara's death. The official story said she had fallen ill suddenly, dying within 3 days of a mysterious fever. But Marcus had been on duty that night. He had seen things that did not match the royal physician's reports. He had heard sounds from the queen's chambers that still haunted his dreams. "I seek only truth, Your Majesty," Marcus said carefully. "Queen Elara was beloved by all. Her death was tragic and natural," Marissa interrupted, her eyes flashing with warning. "And you would do well to remember that if you value your life. Now go. My patience wears thin." Marcus bowed, not out of respect, but out of survival instinct. As he turned to leave, he caught the eye of Thomas, a fellow guard who had trained alongside him years ago. Thomas gave the slightest nod, a gesture so small that only someone who knew him well would notice. It was acknowledgement, perhaps even support. It gave Marcus a small measure of comfort as he walked out of the hall that had been his second home for over a decade. The rain had not let up when Marcus stepped outside. He made his way to the guards' quarters, a modest building attached to the eastern wing of the palace. His room was sparse: a bed, a chest for his belongings, a small table with a single chair. He had never needed much. His life had been about service, duty, and honor. As he packed his few possessions, Marcus allowed himself to remember Queen Elara. She had been kind where others in power were cruel, generous where they were selfish. She had known the names of all her guards, had asked about their families, had ensured they were fairly compensated for their service. When Marcus's mother had fallen ill 3 years ago, Queen Elara had sent her own physician to treat her. His mother had recovered, living another 2 years before passing peacefully in her sleep. Marcus owed Queen Elara everything. He owed her the truth. He carefully wrapped his most precious possession, a small leather journal, in an oilcloth to protect it from the rain. This journal contained all his observations, all his questions, all the pieces of the puzzle he had been slowly assembling. He had written in code, just in case, using a cipher his grandfather had taught him as a boy. If anyone found it, they would see only meaningless scratches and symbols. A soft knock at his door made Marcus freeze. He slipped the journal into his pack and rested his hand on the dagger at his belt. "It's Thomas," came a whispered voice. Marcus opened the door quickly, pulling his friend inside. Thomas looked around nervously before speaking. "You don't have until sunset," Thomas said urgently. "I overheard Marissa talking to her guards. They plan to arrest you within the hour, claim you tried to steal from the royal treasury. They'll execute you before anyone can question it. Marcus felt ice spread through his veins. Why are you telling me this? If they find out, because Elara deserves justice, Thomas said firmly. I loved her too. We all did. Something evil happened in this palace 6 months ago, and Marissa is covering it up. I don't have your courage to investigate, Marcus. I have a wife and 2 children to protect. But I can help you escape. I can buy you time. Marcus gripped his friend's shoulder. Thank you, brother. Thomas handed him a small pouch. Money. Not much, but enough to get you started. There's a merchant named Willem who owes me a favor. He has a shop in the lower city near the eastern gate. He can help you leave the city safely. What about you? I'll say you overpowered me. A few bruises will make the story convincing. Thomas managed a weak smile. Now go. The secret passage behind the old armory. You remember it? Marcus nodded. The passage was ancient, probably older than the current palace structure. Most guards didn't know about it anymore. But Marcus had discovered it years ago during a routine inspection. It leads to the gardens outside the palace walls, Thomas continued. From there, you can make your way to the city, move quickly and stay in the shadows. And Marcus, find the truth. For Elara. The 2 men embraced briefly. Then Marcus slipped out the door and into the corridor. The palace was a maze of hallways, but he knew them all. He moved swiftly and silently, avoiding the main passages where guards would be stationed. The rain continued to drum against the windows, providing cover for any sounds his boots might make on the stone floors. The old armory was in a forgotten corner of the palace, a room rarely used since the new armory had been built 20 years ago. Marcus slipped inside, closing the heavy wooden door behind him. The room smelled of dust and old leather. Rusted weapons hung on the walls, relics from past wars and past glories. He moved to the back wall and pressed his hand against a particular stone. It gave slightly under his touch, and a section of the wall swung inward, revealing a narrow passage. Marcus lit the small lantern he had brought, squeezed through the opening, and pulled the wall closed behind him. The passage was tight and smelled of damp earth. Marcus had to duck his head as he moved forward, one hand holding the lantern, the other trailing along the wall. Water dripped from somewhere above, and he could hear the faint sounds of movement, probably rats. The passage twisted and turned, descending gradually. Marcus counted his steps, just as he had done the first time he explored this route. 247 steps to freedom. When he finally emerged, he found himself in a thick grove of trees just outside the palace walls. The rain had created a muddy mess, but Marcus welcomed it. Rain meant fewer people in the streets, fewer eyes to see him. He extinguished his lantern and moved carefully through the trees, heading toward the city proper. The lower city was a stark contrast to the palace district. Here, buildings leaned against each other like tired old men. The streets were narrow and filled with puddles. Merchants had closed their stalls early because of the rain, and only a few desperate souls hurried through the downpour, cloaks pulled tight around their shoulders. Marcus kept his head down as he navigated the winding streets. He had visited the lower city occasionally during his years as a guard, usually on errands for the palace or to visit the market. He knew enough to find his way to the eastern gate, where Thomas had said this merchant Willem had his shop. He found it tucked between a baker's shop and a cobbler's stall, a small establishment with a faded wooden sign that read, Willem's Wares. Marcus pushed open the door, a bell chiming softly to announce his arrival. The shop was cramped and cluttered, filled with an odd assortment of goods, pottery, cloth, tools, dried herbs, and items Marcus couldn't readily identify. Behind a worn wooden counter stood a man with silver hair and sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. We're closed, the man said, his voice raspy. Thomas sent me, Marcus said quietly, approaching the counter. He said you owed him a favor. Willem studied Marcus for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded slowly. Thomas is a good man. Saved my son from a false theft charge 2 years back. I told him I'd repay the debt when he needed it. He paused. You're the guard who's been asking questions about Queen Elara's death. It wasn't a question. Marcus wondered how much this merchant knew, how much gossip flowed through the lower city. I am, Marcus admitted. And now, Queen Marissa wants me dead. Smart woman, in a ruthless sort of way, Willem said. She knows a threat when she sees one. You need to disappear, and quickly. By now, her guards will be searching the city. Can you help me? Willem moved to the shop's front window and peered out at the rainy street. I can get you out of the city, yes. But where will you go? A man on the run needs more than just escape. He needs purpose, direction. Otherwise, he's just delaying the inevitable. Marcus thought of the journal in his pack, of all the unanswered questions. I need information about Queen Elara's final days, about who had access to her chambers, about the physicians who treated her. I need to know what really happened. Dangerous knowledge, Willem murmured. The kind that gets a man killed. He turned from the window to face Marcus. But I might know someone who can help. Before Elara died, her personal handmaiden was dismissed from service, a woman named Clara. She was told to leave the city, but she didn't go far. Last I heard, she was living in a village called Millbrook, about 2 days' ride north of here. Marcus felt a spark of hope. He remembered Clara vaguely, a quiet woman with dark hair who had served Queen Elara for many years. If anyone knew the truth about the Queen's final days, it would be her. I need a horse, Marcus said, and supplies for the journey. Willem shook his head. A horse would make you too visible. Marissa's guards will be watching all the roads. I can get you a place in a supply wagon leaving tonight. The driver is reliable and won't ask questions. He's heading to a town called Riverdale, which is on the way to Millbrook. From there, you'll need to continue on foot. Thank you, Marcus said sincerely. I'm in your debt. Save your thanks, Willem replied. Debt is paid to Thomas, not to you. Now, you need to hide until nightfall. There's a cellar beneath this shop. It's not comfortable, but it's safe. Follow me. Willem led Marcus through a door at the back of the shop and down a narrow staircase. The cellar was small and dark, with barrels stacked along one wall and crates along another. The smell of earth and old vegetables filled the air. Stay quiet and stay hidden, Willem instructed. I'll bring you food and water. The wagon leaves 2 hours after sunset. I'll come get you when it's time. Marcus watched as Willem climbed back up the stairs, leaving him alone in the darkness. He set down his pack and sat on the dirt floor, his back against the cold stone wall. The adrenaline that had carried him through his escape was fading now, leaving exhaustion in its wake. He pulled out his journal and opened it carefully, squinting in the dim light that filtered down from the shop above. He had filled dozens of pages with his observations, his questions, his theories. He ran his finger down one page, reading the entries he had made the night Queen Elara died. The Queen had been in perfect health the morning before her sudden illness. She had ridden her horse through the palace gardens, had met with her council, had laughed at dinner. Marcus had been on duty outside her chambers that evening. He had heard her dismiss her handmaiden Clara at the usual time. Then, around midnight, he had heard raised voices from inside the chambers, Queen Elara's voice and another voice, feminine but muffled. An hour later, Queen Elara's personal physician had been summoned. By morning, the Queen was gravely ill. 3 days later, she was dead. And within a week, her cousin Marissa had claimed the throne, citing some obscure clause in the royal succession laws that Marcus still didn't fully understand. Marcus closed the journal and held it against his chest. 6 months of investigation, and he still had more questions than answers. Who had been in Queen Elara's chambers that night? What had made her so suddenly ill? Why had Clara been dismissed so abruptly after Elara's death? And what role did Marissa play in all of it? The sound of footsteps above pulled Marcus from his thoughts. He tensed, his hand moving to his dagger. But then he heard Willem's voice speaking to a customer. The shop was still open, conducting its usual business. Marcus forced himself to relax, knowing he had hours to wait before the wagon arrived. He must have dozed off because the next thing he knew, Willem was shaking his shoulder. Marcus came awake instantly, years of guard training making him alert in seconds. It's time, Willem said quietly. The wagon is here. The driver's name is Bernard. He knows to expect a passenger, but I haven't told him who you are. Best if you keep your identity to yourself. Marcus gathered his belongings and followed Willem up the stairs. The shop was dark now, closed for the night. Willem led him to a back door that opened onto an alley. A covered wagon stood waiting, its two horses stamping impatiently in the mud. A stocky man with a weather-beaten face sat on the driver's bench. He nodded to Marcus but said nothing. Willem gestured to the back of the wagon. "Supplies for Riverdale," Willem explained. "Fabric, tools, some barrels of salt. You'll have to ride among the cargo. It's not comfortable, but it should get you past the city gates without inspection." Marcus climbed into the wagon, finding a space between two large crates. The canvas covering would hide him from view. But the smell of salt and damp cloth was almost overwhelming. Willem appeared at the back of the wagon one last time. "Clara, the handmaiden, be careful how you approach her. If she was dismissed by Marissa, there's a reason. She might be too frightened to talk. Or she might be working for Marissa, set up as bait to catch anyone asking questions." "I understand," Marcus said. "Thank you again, Willem. Thomas chose his friends well." Willem's expression softened slightly. "Queen Elara was a good woman. My wife was sick last winter, too poor for a physician. The queen heard about it somehow and sent medicine, no charge. My wife recovered. We owe Elara our lives. If finding the truth about her death means helping you, then it's a small price to pay." He disappeared from view, and moments later, Marcus felt the wagon lurch into motion. The wooden wheels creaked and groaned as Bernard guided the horses through the narrow streets of the lower city. Marcus lay still among the supplies, his body tense, waiting for the shout that would mean they had been stopped, that Marissa's guards had found him. But no shout came. The wagon rolled steadily onward, the sound of rain on the canvas covering like 1,000 tiny drums. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only half an hour, Marcus heard Bernard call out to someone. The city guards at the eastern gate, most likely. "Just supplies for Riverdale," Bernard said, his voice bored and routine. "Fabric and tools, like always." There was a pause, then another voice. "You're traveling late, and in this rain." "Got a buyer who needs the fabric by tomorrow morning," Bernard replied. "Extra silver in it for me if I arrive on time. You know how it is." Marcus held his breath. If they searched the wagon, it was over. He would be caught, arrested, executed. All his questions would die with him, and Queen Elara's death would remain a mystery forever. "All right, go on through," the guard finally said. "Safe travels." The wagon moved forward, and Marcus heard the massive wooden gates creak open. They passed through, and the sound of the city began to fade behind them. Marcus allowed himself to breathe again. He was out of the city. He was alive, and he was one step closer to finding the truth. The journey to Riverdale took the entire night. Marcus remained hidden among the supplies, his body aching from the cramped position and the constant jostling of the wagon over rough roads. The rain finally stopped sometime before dawn, and pale gray light began to filter through the canvas covering. When the wagon finally came to a halt, Marcus heard Bernard climb down from the driver's bench. The man appeared at the back of the wagon, his face tired but friendly. "We're here," Bernard said simply. "Riverdale. There's an inn called the Copper Kettle on the main street. The owner is my cousin. Tell her Bernard sent you, and she'll give you a room and a meal, no questions asked. From here to Millbrook, you're on your own. It's about a day's walk north, following the river road." Marcus climbed stiffly out of the wagon, grateful to stretch his legs. They were in a small town square, with shops just beginning to open for the day. The air smelled of bread baking and wood smoke. "How much do I owe you?" Marcus asked, reaching for the small pouch of coins Thomas had given him. Bernard waved him off. "Willem already paid me, and he told me enough to know you're doing something important. Just be careful. These are dangerous times, and powerful people don't like their secrets exposed." Marcus thanked him and made his way through the awakening town. He found the Copper Kettle easily, a two-story building with a brightly painted sign. Inside, the main room was warm and inviting, with several tables and a fireplace where a small fire crackled. A woman with graying hair and a kind face looked up from wiping down a table. "Help you?" "Bernard sent me," Marcus said quietly. "He said you might have a room." The woman's expression shifted to understanding. "Bernard's cousin, are you? Well, any friend of his is welcome here. I'm Martha. You look like you could use breakfast and a bath in that order." She led him to a table and brought him a plate of eggs, bread, and bacon, along with a mug of hot tea. Marcus ate gratefully, realizing he hadn't had a proper meal since before his confrontation with Queen Marissa. As he ate, he observed the other patrons, mostly local merchants and travelers, none paying him any particular attention. After breakfast, Martha showed him to a small room on the second floor. It was simple but clean, with a bed, a wash basin, and a window overlooking the street. "Stay as long as you need," Martha said. "But if you're traveling on to Millbrook, I'd suggest leaving tomorrow morning. The road is safe enough during daylight, but you don't want to be caught between towns after dark." There have been reports of bandits in the area. Marcus thanked her and closed the door. He removed his guard uniform, feeling strange without it. He washed as best he could with the basin of water Martha had provided, then examined his few belongings. He had his dagger, his journal, a change of clothes, and the coins Thomas had given him. Not much to build a new life on, but enough for now. He lay down on the bed, intending to rest for just a moment, but exhaustion overtook him. When he woke, the sun was high in the sky, and he realized he had slept for several hours. He sat up quickly, momentarily disoriented, before remembering where he was. Marcus spent the rest of the day trying to stay inconspicuous. He ventured out to the market, purchased some travel supplies, dried meat, bread, a water skin, and listened to the conversations around him. He was relieved that no one seemed to be talking about a fugitive guard from the capital. Either news traveled slowly, or Marissa was keeping his escape quiet to avoid embarrassing questions. That evening, sitting in the common room of the Copper Kettle, Marcus overheard two merchants discussing the situation in the capital. "Queen Marissa is tightening her grip," one of them said, shaking his head. "More taxes, more guards, more rules. It wasn't like this under Queen Elara." "Careful," his companion warned, glancing around nervously. "Speaking against the queen can get you arrested these days. My brother said Marissa has spies everywhere, listening for any hint of disloyalty." "It's just not right," the first merchant continued, lowering his voice. "Queen Elara dies suddenly. And within a week, Marissa takes the throne. No proper mourning period, no investigation. Just a quick funeral, and then business as usual. Something's not right about it." Marcus wanted to join their conversation, to tell them he shared their suspicions. But he kept silent, knowing it would be foolish to draw attention to himself. Instead, he finished his meal and returned to his room, where he spent the evening reviewing his journal by candlelight. The next morning, Marcus rose before dawn. He dressed in simple traveling clothes, strapped his dagger to his belt, and shouldered his pack. Martha was already awake, preparing bread in the kitchen. "Off to Millbrook, then?" she asked, handing him a wrapped package. "Some food for the road. The path follows the river most of the way." "Can't miss it." Marcus paid her from his dwindling supply of coins and stepped out into the cool morning air. The town was still quiet, with only a few early risers moving about their business. He found the river road easily, a well-worn path that ran alongside a wide, slow-moving river. The water reflected the pink and orange of the sunrise, and birds called from the trees along the banks. Walking felt good after being cooped up in the wagon and then the inn. Marcus set a steady pace, his guard training making the journey easier than it might have been. He passed a few other travelers during the morning. A farmer with a cart, a woman with 2 children, a merchant on horseback. Each time, Marcus kept his head down and offered only a brief greeting. As the day wore on, the landscape changed, gradually. The flat farmland around Riverdale gave way to rolling hills. The river narrowed, flowing faster over rocky sections. Marcus saw fewer travelers now, and the isolation gave him time to think about what he would say to Clara, assuming he could find her. What if she refused to talk to him? What if she was too frightened of Marissa? Or worse, what if Willem had been right and Clara was bait, waiting to trap anyone who came asking questions? Marcus knew he was taking a risk, but he couldn't turn back now. He owed Queen Elara the truth. The sun was beginning to set when Marcus crested a hill and saw Millbrook spread out in the valley below. It was smaller than Riverdale, just a cluster of houses around a central square, with fields and pastures stretching out around it. Smoke rose from chimneys, and Marcus could see people moving about, finishing their daily tasks before nightfall. He descended the hill and entered the village. A few curious eyes followed him. Stranger in a small village would naturally attract attention, but no one challenged him. Marcus made his way to what appeared to be a general store, reasoning that the shopkeeper would know everyone in town. Inside, he found an elderly man arranging jars on a shelf. The man turned, his weathered face breaking into a welcoming smile. "Evening, stranger," he said cheerfully. "Passing through or looking for something specific?" "Both, actually," Marcus replied. "I'm looking for a woman named Clara. I was told she lives in Millbrook." The shopkeeper's smile faded slightly. "Clara? Aye, she's here. Keeps to herself mostly. Lives in a small cottage on the eastern edge of the village, the one with the blue door. But I should warn you, she doesn't much like visitors. Had a hard time before she came here, from what I understand. Doesn't talk about it." "I understand," Marcus said. "Thank you." He purchased a few items, more to seem less suspicious than out of need, and asked where he might find lodging. "Only place is old Widow Harrison's house," the shopkeeper said. "She rents out a room to travelers sometimes. Big house, red roof, on the north side of the square. Tell her Jeremiah sent you." Marcus found the house easily and arranged for a room. Widow Harrison was a talkative woman who seemed delighted to have company. She fed him a hearty dinner of stew and bread while telling him the entire history of Millbrook, its residents, and their various relationships and feuds. Marcus listened politely, but his mind was on Clara and what he would say to her. After dinner, claiming exhaustion from his journey, Marcus retired to his room. But he didn't sleep. Instead, he sat by the window, watching the village square, waiting for full darkness to fall. He had decided to approach Clara's cottage tonight rather than wait until morning. If she was being watched, a midnight visit would be less conspicuous than arriving in daylight. When the village finally settled into quiet darkness, Marcus slipped out of the house. The moon was half full, providing just enough light to navigate by. He made his way through the silent streets, past darkened houses and closed shops, until he reached the eastern edge of the village. He found the cottage with the blue door exactly where the shopkeeper had described it. It was small but well-maintained, with a neat garden and smoke rising from the chimney. A single window glowed with soft candlelight. Marcus approached carefully, watching for any sign of trouble. When he reached the door, he hesitated. What if this was a mistake? What if Clara screamed and raised the alarm? But he had come too far to turn back now. He knocked softly, 3 gentle taps. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then he heard footsteps, and the door opened a crack. A woman's face appeared, illuminated by the candle she held. Marcus recognized her, older than he remembered, with more lines around her eyes, but definitely Clara, Queen Elara's former handmaiden. "I'm sorry to disturb you," Marcus said quickly, keeping his voice low. "My name is Marcus. I served as a royal guard in the palace. I need to talk to you about Queen Elara." Clara's face went pale. She tried to close the door, but Marcus put his hand against it gently. "Please," he said urgently. "I was there the night she fell ill. I know something was wrong. I've been investigating her death, and Queen Marissa has banished me from the palace because of it. I'm not here to hurt you. I just need the truth." Clara studied his face for a long moment. Then, slowly, she opened the door wider. "Come in quickly," she whispered, "and pray no one saw you approach." Marcus stepped inside, and Clara closed the door firmly behind him, sliding a heavy bolt into place. The cottage was small, just one main room with a fireplace, a table, a couple of chairs, and a bed in the corner. Everything was neat and clean, but there was a sense of loneliness about the place that made Marcus's heart ache. Clara set her candle on the table and studied Marcus carefully. "I remember you," she said finally. "You were always respectful, always proper. Queen Elara liked you. She said you were one of the few guards who saw her as a person, not just a crown." "She was a remarkable woman," Marcus said softly. "And she didn't die of natural causes, did she?" Clara's eyes filled with tears. "No," she whispered. "She didn't. And I've been living with that knowledge for 6 months, too terrified to speak, too guilty to forget." She sank into one of the chairs, and Marcus sat across from her. The candle flickered between them, casting dancing shadows on the walls. "Tell me what happened," Marcus said gently. "Tell me everything. Clara took a shaky breath. I served Queen Elara for 15 years. I knew her better than anyone in that palace. I dressed her, fixed her hair, listened to her worries and her joys. She was like a sister to me, despite the difference in our stations. She paused, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. That last week she was worried. Her cousin Marissa had been visiting the palace frequently, always with some new grievance or complaint. Elara told me that Marissa was pressuring her about succession, claiming that as Elara had no children, Marissa should be named official heir. But Elara didn't trust Marissa. She told me she was planning to name someone else, someone who would rule with kindness and wisdom. Marcus leaned forward. Who? I don't know, Clara admitted. She never told me the name. She said it was safer if fewer people knew until the official announcement. But she was going to declare her choice within the month. And then she fell ill, Marcus prompted. Clara nodded, her face anguished. The night before she got sick, Marissa visited her chambers. I remember because it was late, nearly midnight. I had already prepared Elara for bed, but she told me to stay that she wanted a witness to the conversation with Marissa. What did they talk about? The succession again. Marissa was furious, threatening. She said that if Elara didn't name her as heir, there would be consequences. Elara remained calm, but I could see she was frightened. After Marissa left, Elara asked me to bring her some wine. She said her head ached from the stress. Clara's voice dropped to barely a whisper. I brought her the wine from the carafe in her sitting room. The same carafe that was always kept filled by the palace servants. She drank one glass and I helped her into bed. I stayed with her for a while and she seemed fine. Eventually, she told me I could go, that she wanted to sleep. But something happened after you left, Marcus guessed. Yes, Clara said, her tears flowing freely now. The next morning, when I came to wake her, she was terribly ill. Fever, weakness, confused. The physicians came immediately, but nothing they did seemed to help. She got worse each day. On the third day before she died, she gripped my hand and whispered something. Marcus held his breath. What did she say? She said, the wine. Clara, it was the wine. And then she was gone. The room was silent except for the crackling of the fire. Marcus felt a cold rage building in his chest. The wine was poisoned. I believe so, Clara said. But I had no proof. I was just a handmaiden, and Marissa was already positioning herself to take the throne. The day after Elara died, Marissa's guards came to my cottage and told me I was dismissed from service. They gave me a bag of gold and told me to leave the city and never speak of Queen Elara's death to anyone. They said if I did, they would arrest me for the murder, claim that I had poisoned the wine in a fit of jealousy or madness. So you came here, Marcus said. I came here and tried to forget, but I can't forget. Every night I see her face, hear her last words. I should have tasted the wine first. I should have protected her. It's not your fault, Marcus said firmly. You couldn't have known, but now we have a chance to give Queen Elara justice. Your testimony. My testimony means nothing, Clara interrupted bitterly. I have no proof. It's my word against Queen Marissa's, and who do you think the nobles will believe? The queen or a dismissed handmaiden? Marcus thought of his journal, of all the observations and questions he had carefully recorded. Maybe not alone, but combined with other evidence, other testimonies, it might be enough. The royal physician who treated her is dead, Clara said flatly. He died 2 months ago. Fell from his horse, they said. But the physician was an excellent writer. It seemed too convenient. Marcus felt his stomach sink. What about the servants who filled the wine carafe? There were 3 who had access to Elara's chambers. One died a month after the queen, a sudden illness that the doctors couldn't explain. The other 2 were transferred to other households outside the capital. I don't know where. Marissa is covering her tracks, Marcus said, eliminating anyone who might have seen something or known something. Which is why you need to leave, Clara said urgently. Go far away, Marcus. Start a new life somewhere Marissa can't reach you. This is a fight you cannot win. I can't give up, Marcus insisted. There has to be someone else who knows something, some piece of evidence that Marissa couldn't destroy. Clara was quiet for a moment, then said slowly, There might be one person, Elara's private secretary, a man named Edmund. He handled all her correspondence, kept records of all her meetings. If Elara had documented her concerns about Marissa, if she had written down the name of her intended heir, Edmund would know. Where is he? Still in the palace, as far as I know. He was too valuable to dismiss. He knows too much about the kingdom's business. But he's kept under close watch. Marissa's guards monitor who he sees, who he talks to. Marcus stood and paced the small room, his mind racing. If I could get a message to him, convince him to help. It's too dangerous, Clara protested. You can't go back to the capital. You'd be arrested the moment you set foot in the city. Then I need someone who can go for me. Someone Marissa wouldn't suspect. Who? Everyone in the palace is either loyal to Marissa or too frightened to act against her. Marcus thought of Thomas, his friend who had helped him escape. But Thomas had a family to protect. He couldn't ask him to take such a risk. Then another face came to mind. Father Dominic, the royal chaplain. He had served the palace for 30 years, had known both Elara and Marissa since they were children. He was one of the few people in the kingdom who could move freely without suspicion, his position as a holy man protecting him from even Marissa's paranoia. I know someone, Marcus said. I just need to figure out how to reach him. Clara stood and went to a small chest in the corner. She opened it and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. She brought it to the table and unwrapped it carefully, revealing a small portrait miniature in a golden frame. It showed Queen Elara, captured in paint with remarkable skill. She was smiling, her eyes kind and warm. She gave this to me years ago, Clara said softly. A gift on my birthday. Take it. Show it to whoever you can trust. Let them remember what a good woman she was. What a good queen. If that doesn't move them to help you, nothing will. Marcus took the portrait carefully, moved by the trust Clara was placing in him. Thank you. I promise you, I will find the truth. I will make sure everyone knows what Marissa did. Be careful, Clara said. Marissa is cunning and ruthless. She's already killed once to get the throne. She won't hesitate to kill again to keep it. Marcus tucked the portrait safely into his pack and prepared to leave. At the door, he turned back to Clara. Will you be safe here? If Marissa finds out I've spoken to you, I'll leave tomorrow, Clara said. I have a sister in the northern mountains. I'll go to her, at least for a while. And Marcus, if you do manage to expose Marissa, send word. I'll come back to testify, proof or no proof. It's time to stop being afraid. Marcus nodded and slipped out into the night. The village was still quiet, the good people of Millbrook sleeping peacefully in their beds, unaware of the dark secrets and dangerous plots being discussed in their midst. Marcus made his way back to Widow Harrison's house, his mind already working on his next move. He needed to get a message to Father Dominic. The chaplain made monthly visits to the abbey outside the capital city, a routine that Marissa would have no reason to disrupt. If Marcus could intercept him there, convince him to help, they might be able to reach Edmund and uncover whatever evidence Elara had left behind. But the abbey was a 3-day journey from Millbrook, and Marcus had no horse, limited funds, and an entire kingdom's worth of guards potentially looking for him. The odds were not in his favor. But then again, they hadn't been in his favor since the moment he started questioning Queen Elara's death. As Marcus lay in bed that night, sleep eluding him once again, he thought about everything Clara had told him. The poisoned wine, Elara's last words, the convenient deaths of anyone who might have known too much. The picture was becoming clearer, but it was also becoming more dangerous. Queen Marissa had committed murder to steal a throne. She had spent 6 months carefully eliminating evidence and silencing witnesses. She had created a network of spies and guards loyal only to her. And now, she ruled the kingdom with an iron fist, growing more powerful with each passing day. Marcus was just one man, a former guard with no army, no influence, and no proof. But he had something Marissa didn't have, the truth. And sometimes, if you were brave enough and stubborn enough, the truth was enough. Tomorrow, he would begin the journey to the abbey. He would find Father Dominic. He would reach Edmund. He would uncover whatever evidence Queen Elara had left behind. And somehow, He would make sure that justice was served, no matter the cost. The journey to the abbey took Marcus 4 days instead of 3. He avoided main roads, choosing instead to travel through forests and across farmland where he was less likely to encounter soldiers or guards. He slept in barns when he could find sympathetic farmers, and under trees when he couldn't. His supplies ran low, and by the 4th day he was hungry, tired, and questioning whether his plan would even work. The abbey sat on a hillside overlooking a peaceful valley. It was an ancient structure, its stone walls weathered by centuries of wind and rain. As Marcus approached in the late afternoon, he could hear the monks singing their evening prayers, their voices carrying across the valley like the voices of angels. He waited in a grove of trees near the abbey's main gate, watching for Father Dominic. The priest made his monthly visit on the same day each month, the 15th. Today was the 14th, which meant Dominic should arrive tomorrow. Marcus settled in for a long wait, using the time to plan exactly what he would say. As darkness fell, Marcus saw lights appear in the abbey windows. The monks moved about their evening routines with practiced efficiency. He could smell bread baking and heard the distant sound of a bell, calling the brothers to their final prayers of the day. It was a peaceful place, far removed from the politics and violence of the capital. Marcus allowed himself a moment to imagine what it would be like to live such a simple, quiet life. The next morning, Marcus woke to the sound of horses approaching. He peered carefully through the trees and saw a small carriage making its way up the road to the abbey. His heart began to race. This had to be Father Dominic. The carriage stopped at the abbey gates, and a figure in priestly robes stepped out. Even from a distance, Marcus recognized the tall, thin form of Father Dominic. The priest spoke briefly with the monk who answered the gate, then entered the abbey grounds. The carriage departed, heading back down the hill. Marcus knew he had to approach carefully. The abbey was neutral ground, a place of sanctuary, but he couldn't simply walk up to the gate and ask to see Father Dominic. The monks might have heard about a fugitive guard, might feel obligated to report him. He needed to be smart about this. He spent the day watching the abbey's patterns. The monks seemed to have a garden on the eastern side of the compound, and several of them worked there throughout the day. There was also a small side gate that appeared to be used for deliveries. As evening approached, Marcus saw Father Dominic walking in the garden, his hands clasped behind his back, his head bowed in contemplation. This was his chance. Marcus waited until the other monks had gone inside for their evening meal. Then he moved quickly and quietly to the garden's low stone wall. He climbed over and approached Father Dominic, who was standing near a bed of herbs, seemingly lost in prayer. "Father Dominic," Marcus said softly. The priest spun around, startled. His eyes widened when he recognized Marcus. "Marcus, what are you doing here? There are soldiers looking for you. Queen Marissa has declared you a traitor." "I know," Marcus said urgently, "but I need your help, Father. It's about Queen Elara's death." Father Dominic glanced nervously toward the abbey building. "We shouldn't talk here. Follow me, quickly." The priest led Marcus to a small storage shed at the back of the garden. Inside, it was cramped and smelled of earth and tools, but it provided cover from prying eyes. Father Dominic closed the door and turned to face Marcus. "What have you gotten yourself into?" he asked, his voice a mixture of concern and fear. Marcus pulled out the portrait miniature Clara had given him and handed it to the priest. "Do you remember Queen Elara, Father? Do you remember what she stood for? How she treated people?" Father Dominic looked at the portrait, his expression softening. "Of course I remember. She was one of the finest souls I've ever known. Her death was a tragedy." "It was murder," Marcus said bluntly. "Queen Marissa poisoned her to steal the throne." The priest's face went pale. "That's a serious accusation, Marcus. Do you have proof?" Marcus told him everything. Clara's testimony about the wine, Elara's last words, the convenient deaths of potential witnesses, Marissa's threats before Elara fell ill. As he spoke, Father Dominic's expression grew more troubled. "I feared something like this," the priest admitted when Marcus finished. "The succession was too quick, too smooth. And Marissa has changed since taking the throne. She was always ambitious, but now there's a cruelty to her that wasn't there before. Or perhaps it was always there, just hidden. I need to reach Edmund, the royal secretary, Marcus said. Clara told me that if Elara documented her concerns about Marissa, Edmund would have those documents. But he's under constant watch in the palace. I can't get to him myself. Father Dominic was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Then he nodded slowly. I can reach Edmund. As royal chaplain, I have access to most areas of the palace, and Marissa wouldn't dare restrict a priest's movements too obviously. It would cause questions among the nobles and the common people alike. You'll help me? Marcus felt a surge of hope. I'll help Queen Elara, Father Dominic corrected gently. If she was murdered, if Marissa stole the throne through such evil means, then God demands justice. I return to the capital tomorrow. I'll speak with Edmund privately. If he has evidence, I'll find a way to get it to you. It's dangerous, Marcus warned. If Marissa finds out. I'm an old man, Father Dominic said with a slight smile. I've lived a full life in service to God and the kingdom. If my final act is to help expose a murderer and a usurper, then so be it. Where can I find you? Marcus thought quickly. There's a village called Riverdale, 2 days south of here. The Copper Kettle Inn. The owner's name is Martha. Tell her you're looking for Bernard's friend. She'll know what it means and can get a message to me. Riverdale, the Copper Kettle, Bernard's friend, Father Dominic repeated. I'll remember. Now you should go before the monks finish their meal and return to their evening duties. Marcus gripped the priest's hand gratefully. Thank you, Father. Queen Elara would have been proud of your courage. Let's hope my courage doesn't fail when I need it most, Father Dominic said. Go with God, Marcus, and be careful. Marissa has eyes and ears everywhere. Marcus slipped out of the shed and made his way back over the garden wall. He moved quickly through the trees, not stopping until the abbey was far behind him. As he walked through the growing darkness, he felt both relieved and anxious. Father Dominic would help, but reaching Edmund and securing evidence would take time. And with each passing day, Marissa grew more entrenched in her stolen power. The journey back to Riverdale was arduous. Marcus's funds had run out completely, and he survived by doing odd jobs in villages along the way, chopping wood, repairing fences, anything that would earn him a meal or a place to sleep. He kept his identity hidden, claiming to be a traveling laborer looking for work. A week after leaving the abbey, Marcus finally arrived back in Riverdale. Martha greeted him with surprise and immediate concern when he walked into the Copper Kettle. You look terrible, she said bluntly. When's the last time you had a proper meal? Marcus couldn't remember. Martha sat him down and brought him food without asking for payment. As he ate, she studied him with worried eyes. Bernard told me you were involved in something dangerous, she said quietly. There have been soldiers through here twice since you left, asking about strangers matching your description. I told them nothing, but they're still looking for you. I know, Marcus said between bites. I'm sorry for bringing trouble to your door. Don't apologize, just be careful. The world needs more people willing to stand up for what's right, even when it's dangerous. She paused. Are you waiting for someone? A message, Marcus said. From a priest named Father Dominic. I'll keep an ear out, Martha promised. In the meantime, you can stay in the attic. It's cramped, but it's hidden. No one would think to look there. Marcus spent the next 2 weeks in Martha's attic, a small space filled with old furniture and forgotten belongings. He could stand only in the center where the roof peaked, and he had to be quiet during the day when the inn was busy with customers. But it was safe, and Martha brought him food and kept him informed about any soldiers or suspicious visitors. The waiting was torture. Marcus spent his time reviewing his journal, adding Clara's testimony, noting Father Dominic's willingness to help. He thought about what would happen if Edmund did have evidence. How would they present it? Who would believe them? Marissa controlled the palace guard and had the support of several powerful nobles. Exposing her would require more than just documents and testimony. It would require a coalition of people brave enough to stand against her. On the 15th day, Father Dominic arrived. Marcus heard Martha's voice downstairs, speaking with someone. Then she climbed the narrow stairs to the attic and whispered urgently, Father Dominic is here. He's in my private quarters. Come quickly. Marcus descended carefully, his heart pounding. Martha led him to a small room behind the kitchen where Father Dominic sat waiting. The priest looked older and more tired than he had at the abbey, but his eyes held a spark of triumph. "You found something," Marcus said immediately. Father Dominic reached into his robes and pulled out a leather document case. Edmund was terrified when I approached him. Marissa's guards watch him constantly, monitor everyone he speaks with. But I managed to get him alone in the palace chapel, under the pretense of hearing his confession. He told me he's been living in fear for months, knowing what Marissa did but too frightened to speak out. "What did he give you?" Marcus asked, gesturing to the case. "Letters," Father Dominic said, opening the case carefully. "Correspondence between Queen Elara and various nobles and advisors. In them, Elara expresses her concerns about Marissa. She documents Marissa's growing aggression, her demands regarding succession, even a threat Marissa made about causing irreparable harm if she wasn't named heir." He pulled out several sheets of paper covered in elegant handwriting. Marcus recognized the royal seal at the top of each page. "There's more," Father Dominic continued. "Elara had decided to name Lord Nathaniel as her heir. He's currently governing the northern provinces. Edmund has a sealed document signed by Elara, officially declaring Nathaniel her chosen successor. This document was written a week before her death but was never made public. Edmund hid it when Marissa took power." Marcus felt his hands shaking as he examined the documents. This was it. This was the proof they needed. This changes everything. With these documents, we can challenge Marissa's claim to the throne. "It's not that simple," Father Dominic cautioned. "We need Lord Nathaniel's support. Without him, these are just papers. Marissa will claim they're forgeries, will arrest anyone who tries to present them. We need someone with enough power and influence to stand against her publicly." "Then we go to Lord Nathaniel," Marcus said. "Show him these documents, tell him what happened. He was loyal to Queen Elara. He'll want justice for her death." "The northern provinces are a month's journey from here," Father Dominic pointed out, "and Marissa will have spies watching the roads. If we try to reach Nathaniel openly, we'll be arrested before we get halfway there." Marcus thought hard. "What about sending the documents by messenger? Someone Marissa wouldn't suspect? Too risky. If the messenger is intercepted, we lose our only evidence." "Then we need to be smart about this," Marcus said. "We travel separately. Father, you can move more freely. Take the sealed succession document and travel north as if you're making your regular visits to the northern parishes. I'll travel separately with the letters. If one of us is caught, the other might still get through." Father Dominic nodded slowly. "It's a sound plan. But what about Clara's testimony? And Edmund's? We'll need them to corroborate what the documents say." "Edmund is too watched," Marcus said. "But Clara said she would come back to testify if we exposed Marissa. Once we have Lord Nathaniel's support, once we've made the evidence public, Edmund will be safe to speak out. Others will too. People are afraid of Marissa, but if they see someone powerful standing against her, they'll find their courage." "When do we leave?" Father Dominic asked. "Tomorrow morning," Marcus decided. "We've waited long enough. Every day Marissa remains in power is another day of injustice." Martha, who had been listening quietly from the doorway, spoke up. "I can help. My nephew runs a trading company that travels regularly to the northern provinces. He can provide you with a cover story, perhaps even include you in one of his caravans." Merchants attract less attention than lone travelers. "Thank you," Marcus said gratefully. "Every bit of help matters." That night, Marcus barely slept. He kept thinking about all the ways their plan could fail, all the dangers that lay ahead. But he also thought about Queen Elara, about her kindness and her vision for the kingdom. She deserved better than to be murdered and forgotten. She deserved justice. The next morning, Martha's nephew arrived, a young man named Peter with an honest face and a ready smile. He listened to their story without interruption, his expression growing more serious as he understood what they were attempting. "My caravan leaves for the northern provinces in 2 days," Peter said when they finished. "We're transporting wool and grain, nothing exciting. Father Dominic can travel with us as our spiritual advisor. Many caravans hire priests to perform services and blessings along the way. Marcus, you'll need a disguise. Can you handle horses?" "I grew up with horses," Marcus said. "Then you'll be one of our handlers. We have 12 horses pulling the wagons, and I always need good men to care for them." Keep your head down, don't draw attention, and we should reach the northern provinces in 3 to 4 weeks. It was arranged. Father Dominic would travel openly with Peter's caravan. Marcus would disguise himself as a horse handler, a position that was common enough not to attract notice but important enough to justify his presence. They would keep the documents hidden in separate locations. If questioned, they would have a legitimate reason for traveling north. The 2 days before departure felt endless. Marcus acquired rough work clothes and a broad-brimmed hat that would shade his face. He let his beard grow, changing his appearance slightly. Father Dominic prepared his own travel documents, listing various parishes he intended to visit in the northern territories. Finally, the day arrived. Peter's caravan assembled in the town square. 4 large wagons pulled by strong horses, loaded with goods. There were 6 other workers besides Marcus, all experienced travelers who knew the roads and the dangers. They greeted Marcus with casual friendliness, accepting him as one of their own without question. As the caravan set out, Marcus took a last look at Riverdale. Martha stood in the doorway of the copper kettle, waving. She had risked much to help him. This kind woman who had no obligation to involve herself in dangerous politics. Marcus vowed silently that if he survived this, he would find a way to repay her kindness. The journey north was long and often tedious. The caravan traveled at the pace of the slowest wagon, stopping frequently to rest the horses and maintain the vehicles. They passed through numerous small villages and towns, occasionally encountering other travelers or merchant caravans. Peter had chosen their route carefully, avoiding any major military outposts where they might be questioned too thoroughly. Marcus kept his head down and did his job well. He cared for the horses with the skill born of childhood experience, earning respect from the other workers. At night, when they camped, he would sit near the fire and listen to the conversations, learning the gossip and news from various parts of the kingdom. The news was not encouraging. Queen Marissa had increased taxes dramatically, causing hardship for farmers and merchants. She had expanded the palace guard and begun arresting people on vague charges of treason. Several nobles who had been close to Queen Elara had been stripped of their titles and exiled. The kingdom was changing, becoming harder and colder under Marissa's rule. Father Dominic traveled with them, performing his duties as spiritual advisor with practiced ease. He blessed their meals, offered prayers for safe travel, and spoke with each member of the caravan, providing spiritual counsel when requested. To any observer, he was simply a priest doing his job. No one suspected he carried documents that could topple a queen. 3 weeks into the journey, they encountered their first real danger. A group of soldiers stopped the caravan at a crossroads, demanding to inspect their cargo and question their purpose. Marcus felt his heart race as the soldiers moved through the wagons, examining goods and scrutinizing faces. When they reached Marcus, a soldier looked at him suspiciously. "You look familiar. Have we met?" Marcus kept his voice casual. "Don't think so, sir. I've been working caravans for years, though. Maybe you've seen me on the roads." The soldier studied him a moment longer, then shrugged. "Maybe. Move along." The inspection continued. When they reached Father Dominic, the soldiers were respectful, bowing their heads to the priest. They asked where he was traveling, and he explained his mission to visit northern parishes. The soldiers accepted this without question. After what felt like an eternity, they allowed the caravan to continue. As they traveled on, Marcus allowed himself to breathe again. They had passed one test, but how many more lay ahead? Finally, after nearly a month of travel, the caravan entered the northern provinces. The landscape here was different, more rugged, with mountains rising in the distance and forests of pine stretching across the hills. The air was cooler, fresher. The people they encountered seemed hardier, more independent. Lord Nathaniel's estate was situated on a plateau, overlooking a vast forest. It was an impressive structure, more fortress than palace, built to withstand the harsh northern winters and occasional raids from mountain bandits. As the caravan approached, Marcus felt a mixture of hope and anxiety. Everything depended on Nathaniel's reaction to what they had to tell him. Peter arranged for an audience with Lord Nathaniel, claiming that Father Dominic carried an urgent message from the capital. They were admitted to the estate and led to a great hall where Lord Nathaniel held court. Nathaniel was a man in his mid-40s with gray streaking his dark hair and the weathered look of someone who spent more time outdoors than in comfortable rooms. He carried himself with quiet authority, and his eyes were sharp and assessing as Father Dominic and Marcus were brought before him. "Father Dominic," Nathaniel greeted the priest with genuine warmth. "It's been too long. What brings you so far north?" "I'm afraid I bring troubling news, my lord," Father Dominic said. "News that requires privacy. This matter involves Queen Elara and the succession." Nathaniel's expression immediately became guarded. He gestured to his guards. "Clear the hall. This conversation is private." When they were alone, except for two of Nathaniel's most trusted advisors, Father Dominic produced the documents. He laid them on the table before Nathaniel and began to explain everything. Queen Elara's concerns about Marissa, the suspicious circumstances of her death, Clara's testimony about the poisoned wine, and finally, the sealed document naming Nathaniel as Elara's chosen heir. As Nathaniel read through the papers, his face grew darker with anger and grief. When he finished, he stood and walked to a window, staring out at the forest below. "I knew something was wrong," he said quietly. "When news reached me of Elara's death, my first instinct was to ride to the capital immediately. But then word came that Marissa had taken the throne, and I was advised to stay here, to avoid any appearance of challenging her claim. I've regretted that decision every day since." He turned back to face them. "Elara was more than my queen. She was my friend. We grew up together, trained together. She taught me what it meant to rule with justice and compassion, and Marissa murdered her." "We have no physical proof of the poisoning," Marcus admitted. "But we have testimony. We have these letters documenting Marissa's threats, and we have the succession document. Together, they make a compelling case." "Compelling but not conclusive," Nathaniel said. "Marissa will fight this. She has the palace guard, the royal treasury, and the support of nobles who benefit from her rule. If we challenge her without sufficient support, we'll simply be arrested and executed as traitors." "Then we build support," Father Dominic said firmly. "There are nobles who were loyal to Queen Elara, merchants who suffer under Marissa's heavy taxes, common people who remember how things were before. We gather them, present the evidence, and force Marissa to answer for her crimes." Nathaniel paced the room, thinking. Finally, he nodded. "We'll need to move carefully. I'll send riders to the nobles I trust, those who served Elara loyally. I'll invite them here under the pretense of a council to discuss northern affairs. When they arrive, we'll present the evidence and build our coalition. But this will take time." "How much time?" Marcus asked. "A month, perhaps 6 weeks. I need to be certain of their support before we make any public accusations. If we move too quickly, Marissa will crush us before we can build momentum." Marcus wanted to object, to push for faster action. Every day they delayed was another day Marissa ruled through lies and fear. But he also knew Nathaniel was right. They needed to be strategic, careful. They had come too far to fail now through impatience. "There's one more thing," Marcus said. He told Nathaniel about Clara, about her testimony regarding Elara's last words. "She's willing to come forward and testify publicly. Her words alone won't be enough. But combined with these documents and the support of powerful nobles, they'll help paint a complete picture of what happened." "Bring her here," Nathaniel decided. "She'll be safe in my household. And when the time comes to confront Marissa, her testimony will be crucial. Father Dominic, can you arrange to have her brought north?" "I'll send a trusted messenger," Father Dominic said. "She'll be here within a fortnight." Over the following weeks, Lord Nathaniel's estate became a hub of quiet activity. Nobles began arriving, summoned under various pretexts. Each was taken aside privately and shown the evidence. Some were shocked. Others had suspected something was wrong all along. All agreed that Marissa needed to be exposed and removed from power. A plan began to take shape. They would not march on the capital with an army. That would be civil war, and it would destroy the very kingdom they were trying to save. Instead, they would use the law. They would convene a grand council, an ancient right that allowed the nobility to question and even remove a monarch who had obtained the throne through illegal means. Father Dominic would return to the capital and quietly spread word of the upcoming council, ensuring that nobles sympathetic to their cause would attend. Marcus would remain in the north with Lord Nathaniel, helping to organize and coordinate their efforts. Clara, when she arrived, would be kept safe and prepared for her testimony. On the 40th day after their arrival at Nathaniel's estate, Clara was brought to them. Marcus barely recognized her. She looked stronger, less haunted than she had in Millbrook. When she saw the evidence gathered against Marissa, tears streamed down her face. "Queen Elara would be proud of what you're doing," she told Marcus. "All of you. You're risking everything for truth and justice." "We're doing what's right," Marcus replied simply. The Grand Council was set for 2 months hence, giving them time to ensure all necessary parties would be present. The location would be neutral ground, the ancient assembly hall in a city halfway between the capital and the northern provinces. It was a place where historically the kingdom's most important decisions had been made, and its selection sent a clear message that this was about the kingdom's future, not personal ambition. As the appointed day approached, tension mounted. Messengers traveled constantly between the various noble houses, coordinating travel plans and strategies. Father Dominic returned from the capital with news that Marissa was aware something was happening but didn't yet understand the full scope of what she faced. "She knows nobles are gathering," he reported. "Her spies have told her that much, but she believes it's a political faction trying to gain more power and influence. She doesn't realize they're gathering to accuse her of murder and challenge her right to the throne. Her arrogance will be her downfall," Nathaniel said. "She's so confident in her power that she can't imagine anyone would dare challenge her." Finally, the day of the Grand Council arrived. They traveled to the assembly hall with an escort of guards, the precious documents secured in a locked case. The hall was already filling with nobles from across the kingdom, their various banners and colors creating a tapestry of power and influence. Queen Marissa arrived last, making a grand entrance with her personal guard surrounding her. She wore a crown that had belonged to Queen Elara, and Marcus felt a flash of rage at the sight. That crown had no right to sit on a murderer's head. The Grand Council was called to order by the High Chancellor, an elderly man who had served the kingdom for 40 years. He explained the procedures, the ancient laws that governed such gatherings. Then Lord Nathaniel stood. "I call into question the legitimacy of Queen Marissa's claim to the throne," he announced, his voice carrying through the vast hall. "I present evidence that the late Queen Elara was murdered, and that the throne was obtained through treasonous means." The hall erupted in shocked murmurs. Marissa stood, her face twisted with rage. "This is outrageous! How dare you—" "I dare because I have proof," Nathaniel interrupted calmly. He gestured, and Father Dominic came forward with the document case. "Queen Elara documented her concerns about you in letters to trusted advisors. She recorded threats you made against her. And most importantly, she named me as her chosen heir in a sealed document signed just days before her death. This document was hidden by her secretary, who feared for his life after your sudden rise to power." The documents were presented to the High Chancellor, who examined them carefully. As he read, his expression grew more troubled. Other nobles crowded around, reading over his shoulder, their own shock and anger growing. "This is forgery," Marissa shouted. "An obvious attempt to steal the throne by those who are jealous of my power." "Then let us hear testimony," Nathaniel said. "Clara, who served as Queen Elara's personal handmaiden for 15 years, come forward." Clara stepped up, her voice steady despite the hundreds of eyes watching her. She told her story, the late-night visit from Marissa, the Queen's fear, the wine that was later drunk, Elara's sudden illness, and her final words, "The wine. Clara, it was the wine." "She lies!" Marissa cried. "She was dismissed for incompetence." "Then explain the letters," Nathaniel challenged. "Explain why Queen Elara documented your threats. Explain why she felt the need to name an heir in secret, hiding the document from you. Explain why multiple witnesses who could testify about her final days have died under suspicious circumstances." Marcus stepped forward then, adding his own testimony. He described what he had heard that night from his post outside the Queen's chambers. He presented his journal with its carefully documented observations and questions. He spoke of how he had been banished and threatened when he began to investigate. The evidence mounted. Edmund was brought forward, having been secretly transported north once Clara was safe. He confirmed the document's authenticity and added his own testimony about being monitored and threatened by Marissa's guards. As the accusations piled up, Marissa's confident facade began to crack. She looked around the hall, seeing doubt and suspicion in faces that had once shown her deference. Her own guards shifted uncomfortably, uncertain of their loyalty. "You have no proof of murder," Marissa said desperately. "Only speculation and circumstantial evidence. You cannot remove a queen based on suspicions." "But we can remove a queen who obtained the throne illegally," the High Chancellor said gravely. He held up the succession document. "This bears Queen Elara's seal and signature. It clearly names Lord Nathaniel as her chosen heir. Your claim to the throne is therefore invalid, as you took power without the legal right to do so." The hall erupted again, nobles arguing and debating. But the tide had clearly turned against Marissa. Even those who had benefited from her rule could see the evidence was overwhelming. The High Chancellor called for order. "By the ancient laws of this kingdom, and by the authority vested in this Grand Council, I declare that Queen Marissa's claim to the throne is hereby revoked. She is to be placed under guard and tried for her crimes. Lord Nathaniel, as the rightful heir named by Queen Elara, is recognized as the legitimate ruler of this kingdom." Guards moved forward, but Marissa's personal guards blocked them. For a tense moment, violence seemed inevitable. Then one of Marissa's guards, a man who had once served under Marcus, stepped aside. "I will not defend a murderer," he said quietly. One by one, the other guards followed his example. Marissa stood alone, her power crumbling around her. She was taken into custody, still protesting, still denying everything. But her reign was over. In the days that followed, the truth spread throughout the kingdom. The people learned how Queen Elara had been murdered, how Marissa had stolen the throne through poison and deceit. There was grief for Elara and rage at the betrayal. But there was also hope that justice had finally been served. Marissa was tried and found guilty of murder and treason. The sentence was exile to a remote island, where she would live out her days under guard, unable to harm anyone ever again. Some argued she should be executed, but Lord Nathaniel, now King Nathaniel, chose mercy, arguing that enough blood had been shed. Marcus was offered his position as royal guard back, along with a promotion and honors for his role in uncovering the truth. But he declined. After everything he had been through, the palace held too many dark memories. Instead, he asked for a small piece of land in the northern provinces, where he could live quietly and perhaps start a family. His request was granted along with a generous pension. Clara was given a similar reward and chose to return to palace service, this time as head of the household staff. Edmund remained as royal secretary, his loyalty to truth rewarded with King Nathaniel's complete trust. Father Dominic returned to his duties as royal chaplain, and his role in exposing Marissa made him beloved throughout the kingdom. Thomas, Marcus's friend who had helped him escape, was promoted to captain of the guard. Willem, the merchant who had helped Marcus leave the capital, received a royal charter for his business and thrived under the new king's fair policies. On the first anniversary of King Nathaniel's coronation, a monument was erected in the palace gardens, a beautiful stone sculpture of Queen Elara, created to remember her kindness and her vision for the kingdom. Marcus attended the dedication ceremony, standing quietly at the back of the crowd. As he watched the king unveil the monument, Marcus thought about the long journey that had brought them all to this moment. From the rainy night when he was banished from the palace to the Grand Council where the truth had finally been revealed, it had been a path filled with danger and uncertainty. But it had been worth it. Queen Elara had her justice. The truth had been uncovered. And the kingdom, though scarred by Marissa's brief reign, was healing under a leader who understood what it meant to rule with honor. Marcus slipped away before the ceremony ended, returning to his simple home in the northern hills. He had done what he set out to do. Now it was time to live the quiet life he had earned, knowing that sometimes one person with courage and determination could change the course of history. Queen Elara's legacy lived on, not just in the monument or in the stories people told, but in the example she had set. She had taught them all that leadership was about service, that power was a responsibility, and that truth, no matter how difficult or dangerous to pursue, was always worth fighting for. And Marcus, the humble guard who had refused to let an injustice stand, had proven that even the most ordinary person could be extraordinary when the moment demanded it.